Hi there, it's Marcus here. I'm going to have a good chat with Amanda Reeves, whom I've known for, 4 or 5, 6 years? I'm not sure. I haven't
About
kept
that.
count actually, something like that. And Amanda came across my radar because she's does really interesting futures work, creative work, embodied work, playful work, plays with Lego and all sorts of stuff like that. And she's obviously, well, I say obviously, she has run a consultancy for a period of time and does that kind of stuff. You've trained in art therapy, and which is a fabulous modality, and so on. But because you are such a multiple person, Amanda, how would you introduce yourself to, let's say, a potential client, or even just you're chatting with someone over a coffee?
Thanks, Marcus. And it's a great question. I think every time I answer it a little
Different.
differently.
Yes.
So at the moment, I'd say that I'm primarily an art therapist first, but I do have a background in futures and futures thinking, and I'm very interested in the work that Marcus has been doing about futures feeling. And I think that's kind of what's dragged me into this space, or pulled me towards this space of art therapy, where it's quite interesting. I knew that I wanted to study at the place I did, at the MyCat school in Fitzroy in Melbourne. I knew I wanted to study there because at the introduction session, they talked about their 4 values, and the first value they mentioned was emergence. And that just clicked for me that there's something. So if I think about the two different aspects of my practice at the moment, I think how they come together is that I'm really interested in working with people, very much working relationally, working creatively, thinking beyond just our rational minds, of course, keeping that, but also extending into what knowledge the body can offer us, what knowledge, what data we can get from feeling and sensation, and really working with people to figure out what patterns are happening, what is their role in those patterns, what other patterns would they like to be creating. And so I think that's kind of the core of what I do, whether I'm working independently with people doing art therapy, whether I'm doing facilitating workshops, whether I'm doing organizational foresight, that sort of idea of what are the patterns we're creating, what's our role, and what patterns do we want to create now is where it
Thank you.
sits.
You very skillfully glided past the fact that you're teaching into a master's of MBA with Monash, right? Uh,
That's right.
so tell us a bit about that as well, so people can see that you
Sure.
actually are also working in a much more what I would call a structured environment.
That's very fair. And I think last time I spoke with you for one of these, I introduced myself as an educator. So, yeah, I think I do
You're a
love the
chameleon, aren't you? Like I'm a chameleon for sure.
yes. And there's something quite nice about always being in a state of becoming, you know? There's what I'm doing now, but there's always what I'm moving towards, and
Yeah.
I find that really rewarding. So, education-wise, yes, I'm teaching currently with the Monash Business School. I'm co-teaching a subject that I contributed towards the development of, which is called the Sustainable Enterprise, and really looking at how can people in organizations be stewards of that organization, to think about sustainability of that organization, whether it's social, economic, or environmental, and helping them to use futures methods to envision a more sustainable future for that enterprise, and then helping them backcast around what they might need to do to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent, excellent. So, I mean, so these are all great things to be doing. So, anybody who comes into your sphere of influence is very lucky, Amanda, I'd have to say. Now, you and another very naughty person called Claire Marshall have been obviously coming into one another's spheres of influence for a while.
Yes.
And, we were at the Oceania conference 2 weeks ago now, and you and she ran this lovely little exercise. There you go. Ooh. In which you got it was the mini Museum of the Futures. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it emerged?
Yes.
Where did it come from?
Well, I want to say the seed for this was planted actually quite a while ago. The first time that Claire and I spoke was, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago, probably the
Okay.
same time we came into orbit. And I had the wonderful chance to interview Claire for FuturePod, and that was our first conversation. And some of the seeds that came from that resulted in some of her thinking around how we can get capitalism out of our heads, which has become a really cool part of her PhD, which has been such a cool thing to watch. A little chat like this, blossom into something new. But we hadn't actually worked together on anything else since then. We'd been in touch.
Yep.
And then it was our great fortune that the organisers of the Oceania Future Symposium were blessed with so many different applications that they suggested that there was some connection between Claire and I, and that maybe we could work together and combine our ideas. And it resulted in the Mini Museum of Futures, which is one of those things where it feels like the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. So I brought from my art therapy background, I've really been inspired by one of my teachers called Nona Cameron, and she did this beautiful reflective practice of daily creating a little reflection that sat in a matchbox. And I thought that was a really lovely way to invite people at the forum, the symposium, to be able to create a little sort of almost like a memento mori, a little pocket-sized thing that could remind them of what mattered to them at that conference, what they were taking away, what they were hopeful for.
Beautiful.
And and we and then working with Claire, we built into the work that she's been doing for about 5 years or so around the Museum of the Future, where she had been inviting, working with different communities, pairing community members up with artists to envision what they hoped for the future, and then have an artist create a formal artwork that represents that. And so when we smushed these together, we decided to make a tiny miniature gallery, complete with little figurines that could look at the artwork and lighting. And we decided to invite the conference attendees to make this little memento of what mattered to them, what was staying with them from the conference. And we got to host a beautiful little exhibition at the end with so many first-time exhibiting artists. We had artist talks, we had a celebration. It was just such a wonderful way to really reduce or consolidate some of the richness
Yep.
that the symposium offered.
Yep. Absolutely, and I was lucky enough to be with you and to be a part of that. I mean, to me, the energy was quite incredible, and the delight that people took in the final presentation, where you set it up in the matchboxes, were in slightly bigger boxes. But what was, I think, really special was the invitation for us to offer a narrative to go
Yes.
with the matchbox creation that we had. And people don't know, of course, because they weren't there, but it wasn't just like I'm showing one form of the matchbox. This is by Caitlin Noakes, or Dr. Caitlin Noakes, who was there.
Yes.
And she and I swapped ours just because we could, and it was a nice thing to do. But, so hers is kind of two-dimensional. Mine was made completely out of the clay that you gave us. Other
Yes.
people were doing collages. People were using all sorts of physical objects that you'd scattered over the table, all different little metal keys, and so it really did provide people with a media that spoke to them.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the narrative, some of those narratives, I hope that you and Claire actually piece them together and do something with them, because they were quite remarkable, I felt.
We do have Nels, who was our videographer
Yes,
and photographer. Sensational work.
yeah,
He very kindly recorded the artist talks at the end, so we've got some not footage, audio files to work through. Yes.
yeah. No, so to me that would be absolutely brilliant. So that to me gets us to where I would like to sort of land in this little conversation.
Go on.
I've, as you know, have been working on futures feeling for some time. You already indicated that in your introduction. So for me, futures work tends to be sort of thought of as strategic and all those kinds of things. We have tools which are very useful, and I have nothing against them. But the futures thinking on its own, I have always felt, is somewhat limited. in some way. When you just think of it as thinking and you apply it as thinking. Whereas the human being is much more than just a thinking being. I recently heard, who was it who quoted at me what's his name? Indy Yahor, the
Ah,
guy,
yes.
yeah, okay. So he said, look, people don't know this. I didn't know this, and I've got my Descartes book up there, Rene Descartes. Yeah, and I haven't gone and checked it, but he said, look, Descartes actually said, I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am.
Oh, oh, that puts
Which
a whole new spin on it,
totally
doesn't it?
changes it. It
Yeah.
totally changes it. And, so if you can go and fact check me, or someone out there listening can. I've got to go and find it because even my Descartes book is lost somewhere in amongst all my books. But, to me, even if he didn't say it, what I like about it is the fact that doubt or ignorance or not knowing or the vulnerability of not knowing comes through. It sounds very absolute to say, I think, therefore I am. And
Yes.
I think our Western civilization has taken that really to heart.
And I think that it's not just about the thinking, you know.
No.
There's a far less, I guess, prestigious source, but there's a television show called The Last Man on Earth that stars Will Forte. And I think it's the first episode, he is the last person on Earth. So fantastic. He can go where he wants, he can do whatever he wants. And there's this sort of montage showing different things he does. And one of the things is he's wearing like a set of knight's armor and he's got one of those tennis ball machines that shoots the balls. And
Yeah.
he's having that happen to him, and it's so thrilling. And then time continues, and at some point, just doing whatever you feel like kind of wears off and doesn't have the same hit. And it sort of cuts to him sort of just lying down in the suit and having those balls hit. And I mention that because it really started getting me thinking about how much our experience is shaped by our sensations and then our narrative about it.
Yeah.
So for me, it doesn't start with, I think, therefore I am. There is this feeling part that comes before. I have
Absolutely.
some sort of engagement, something comes through in my senses, and then I do a bit of narrating about it. And then that helps me understand who I am.
Yeah. So keep going. Tell us more about
Oh,
what you think Future's feeling is about. Where has it taken you, Amanda?
I think where it's taken me is to a place where I feel like sometimes it's taken me to a place where there's still absolutely space for reason. I'm a very logical creature. I do have I'm also very habitual. I've got some real process stuff going on there. But I think that this sort of narrative that we've created that just leaning on our logic, being rational beings, rational actors, it diminishes us in so many ways. There is so much that is happening within us, between us, that actually there's something really important about being able to slow down, actually leave the space of just being in your head and notice. When we slow down and we start to notice what is around us, what we're experiencing, there's such a richness there. And by retreating up just into our minds and the narratives that we have about why we do things, I think it really limits our understanding and our experience.
Yeah.
And it can keep us trapped in places that rationally make sense but don't feel right. And we can have these really incredible disconnects between, yep, rationally that makes sense to me, but my body is saying no.
Yeah.
And if I can't hear my body saying no, then you get into all sorts of messes.
Yeah. No, I love that answer. It's great. For me, yes, one of the things I think that, again, and this is where this misquoting of Descartes really strikes home, is that we think rationality is a certain something. We actually see it as something to do with reality and realism
Mm-hmm.
and pragmatism, perhaps, or utilitarianism. But in
Yes.
actual fact, the way I've become thinking about it, and this has been a 20 odd year journey, there's Whose Reason, Whose Justice? An American philosopher wrote a book, McIntyre, Peter McIntyre, but certainly McIntyre, and it's Whose Reason, Whose Justice, or the other way around, Whose Justice, Whose Reason. But he basically pointed out that reason or rationality, and he's a philosopher, is actually the following to or adherence to rules of meaning making.
Yes.
So if you see it simply in a cognitive sense of there's an empirical sense or an institutional, because institutions have rationality, right?
Hmm.
They actually codify and reinforce rationality. They grow out of rationality. But if we can see rationality as actually something that is a superstructure to the human emotions that sits beneath it, then we can rationalize a Holocaust or, the Nakba or whatever it is.
Mm.
Putin rationalizes the invasion of Ukraine. Trump, in his madness, rationalizes what they're doing in Iran. We can see that when you understand the emotional context that our rationality moves out of, and where does the emotion sit?
Mm.
In the body.
Yeah.
If we are disconnected from the body, we have no relationship to ourselves or anybody else. We are floating, terrified, lost, psychic sparks floating around, creating havoc.
And I don't think our emotions or those sensations disappear. I think we're just not receptive to them. And we that doesn't mean that means that we don't have the chance to be responsive to them, but we can be reactive with them as well. So if we deny what's happening in that emotional sphere, it's still going to come out. It's going to come out in the way we make sense of things. It's going to feed into our reason.
Yeah,
If we think about emotions and sensation as really just information that's being shared with you about what's happening
yeah,
around you, then you're cutting off a really important source of
so important.
intelligence.
Yeah, and that of course is what you are really working on when you do your art therapy stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's such it's a reflective space, just like this.
Yes,
This was a reflective space.
absolutely. And one thing that I really love about art therapy, and a very big part of why I've moved in that direction rather than more traditional talk therapies, is that there's a lot of things that can happen that we can experience that we haven't actually understood well enough to be able to express in words. And I find that using using the arts, using materials, using our voices, our bodies, whatever form that takes, we are able to express things that we might not have words to express otherwise. And through that expression, it then helps us create those words or find those words as well. So it can actually help address some of that gap between what we, our embodied senses, our embodied knowings. It can help make that connection up to our rational tellings.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And then where do we go with this? How do we nurture it? How do we validate it? These are questions that I've been
Mm.
thinking a lot about in the last few years, because what we're talking about is stuff that won't sit easily in a boardroom if you're trying to run, a strategic
Yes.
exercise with
Yes.
people until you've got a relationship with them. One of the odd things I've always thought about consultancy work is that often a consultant will be hired to deliver something or do something,
Hmm.
but then they're gone. There's no ongoing commitment of relationship.
Yes. And I think partly in some settings, in some circumstances, that's exactly why a consultant might be hired, because they
Yeah,
are someone who is expendable.
yeah,
They can deliver a perspective that is not necessarily welcomed, and they can leave.
yeah.
There is something that feels important about that in some particular settings, but
So there's a reason, there's a rationality behind using consultant when you really don't want to change what you're doing, but you want to be seen to be working through the processes that a good leader or institutional agent might be expected to do. Yeah.
yes, and I've seen it on both sides of the fence. This sort of idea of consultant theatre,
I
consultation theatre.
like that
Yeah,
consultant theatre. Oh,
it's sort of the theatre of, yes, we're consulting, we're interested. We would like to co-design this with you. We'd like your input, but we've kind of already made our minds up about what we're doing, but we're going through the motions for display. And yeah, I have found that to be one of the less appealing aspects
Less
of my time
savory,
doing
yes,
consulting.
exactly. And it's why, of course, communities are generally really angry at councils or governments or
Yes.
whatever, because they always go and consult and then do exactly what they were thinking of doing originally.
Yes, and I wonder if that loops back into this idea of rationality. Maybe there's something about rationality and relationality here, but that sort of idea of, well, we've made a rational choice about what to be done, but we haven't been open to other perspectives, other things. We've thought
Yeah,
about this in a very particular way, and we've decided what is right.
exactly. So there's a managerialist rationality. I find
Yes.
adjectives really help me.
Yeah.
So managerialist rationality is not the same as ecological rationality
Absolutely.
or,
Yes.
gendered rationality if you're talking about, male, female or the whole panoply of genders out there and so
Hmm.
on. And of course, well, any way you can go. So to me, I often spend time thinking about my choice of words, the adjectives that I use
Yeah.
because that's why feeling is important. And also because if people cannot speak or give words to something, they actually are not fully cognizant of what that is. So we,
Yes.
we have elephants in the room, ghosts in the machine, or whatever, metaphor we want. But we do. And one of the reasons why I'm so entranced by this idea of navigating the ruins of the future is because there are ghosts everywhere.
Yes. Yes, and whether kind of similar to that, the embodied sensations, if we acknowledge them or not, they still exist and they're still having
They are
some
there.
kind of, uh, through that acknowledgement or through that denial, there's still some kind of influence that's imparted.
The great Nigerian author Ben Okri wrote a book called The Famished Road, in
Mm,
which he has a young boy who can see the ghosts on the backs of people, getting them to do bad things or things in general. It's a fabulous way of depicting what it is. So if you said, well, what's the ghost on the back of a Putin or Netanyahu or whoever, we would start to see the world not in black and white, but in actually inherited, well,
mm,
in their case, it's trauma. But I mean, it
yeah,
could there are people doing remarkably brave, bold, good things around the planet. As we see the planet going up in flames, we see people stepping forward and saying no, no, and we can find them all over the place. So that's what inspires me. So there's this other domain of futures feeling that I think is it's not in, it will never come into focus, but it's an invitation.
mm, mm. Gosh, this has gone places, hasn't
It has.
it?
And I'm thinking, why don't we could wrap this up quite soon, and then I'm going to tap Claire Marshall on the shoulder and say, listen to this, and then have a chat, and then I might also grab Caitlin Noakes, who ran
Oh,
the Ouija
Future
session,
Futures. Yes,
and tap her on the shoulder and get her to listen to you two, and then I will bring all three of you together in one. How does that sound?
that sounds pretty good to me.
I think it sounds good to me too.
Let's see if Claire and Caitlin are keen to party.
Well, I think they will. It's I'll smile a lot and act all humble and grovel.
You'll
Yeah,
turn the charm on.
yeah, exactly, something like that. But no, it has gone somewhere, and it doesn't have to land anywhere. And that's the whole point of a
Mm.
conversation, I think.
And I love that. Every time I speak with you, I feel like it starts in one place and it goes places I never would have expected, but are always really interesting.
Yes, yes, exactly, and that's for me too. It's not planned in any way.
Mm.
So let's maybe we could end with you reflecting either further on the mini museum of the future or some other remarkable little embodied event that you witnessed
Mm.
or you initiated as a way of landing this conversation.
What's calling to me is actually reflecting on the session that I participated in that Caitlin ran, this Ouija board
Right?
session, because yeah, that was a real standout experience for me. And it was quite exciting getting an opportunity to, I'm I love using materials in unexpected ways as an art therapist. My poor long-suffering husband regularly asks me if this is rubbish or if it is art materials, and
Yeah.
it often is art materials. But yeah, this idea of how can we use this tool of a Ouija board, which is often associated with, sleepovers or, having, it's got a long tradition around ritual around contacting the dead, but this sort of reframe of using it to connect with a wise ancestor, to connect with the ghosts that might be hanging on our backs and asking them what they are seeking from us. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to give us an experience of being, I've completely lost the word. There's something there's something around it almost it by contacting ancestors, it also helped me feel like tune into that sense of being a future ancestor as well. Like, what are the things that I would like to pass on? What are my hopes? As well as thinking about what service do I need to offer to,
Yeah.
yeah, make good on my
Beautiful.
ancestors.
Lovely, lovely. Yes, there is so much in that. And of course, we can go intellectual ethics, morals, those sorts of
Mm.
stuff, but also that sense of just passing on the baton of hope, of
Yes.
expansive futures as opposed to constrained futures or degraded
Mm.
futures. I think we've got to give some clear thought to that. So the thinking is still there, but it's I think really facilitated through the kind of work you do, Amanda, and I really think it's fantastic. Wow.
Oh, thanks, Marcus. We need to find more opportunities to do things together. I've said it on
Absolutely.
camera, so now it's got to happen.
Well, we've said it. That's right. We've got it it'll be on YouTube within a few hours. Well,
Fabulous.
thank you so much for giving me this time. I really was looking forward to having this chat with you. And again, I had no expectation other than that I felt it was going to be a good conversation, which it has been. So I will chase Claire and I will chase Caitlin, and
Mhm.
then we'll come together at some point, and I'm going to try and do it over the next 4 weeks or so that it happens more quickly than not, so that we can then have a really lovely offering, I think, on the Future Sanctuary, which is where this will land.
Yes.
And anybody out there who hears this, because of course you might be on my YouTube channel, we have a place called Future Sanctuary. If you're interested, email me. Okay, thank you, Amanda. I'll let you go and
Mhm.
we will sign off.
Thanks, Marcus.